Test.
I've left 2 waters up.
I saw that. I think we all will. We all will. I know I do.
Just leave them there then?
Yeah, they're fine. Somebody came and turned these on. We don't need them for an hour and a half.
No, we don't need them turned on.
I can't turn it off because Doug said it's really hard to do that.
There.
Oh, can you get this one?
Welcome everyone to UUSRQ. It's a pleasure to stand before you and extend this hearty welcome. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces as well as the new. And I'd also like to acknowledge the program moderators and the featured speakers. Thank you for joining us here today for this Banned Books Week event. On behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Social Justice Committee of Sarasota, we want the Social Justice Alliance of the Florida Suncoast to know that we are honored to partner with you. Thank you for this opportunity to join you in your work to shine a light on and to push back on efforts to ban or censor the freedom to read books. We also value access to information, and we believe it is absolutely essential that people do something to defend books from censorship. We proudly stand with you in advocating and protecting the freedom to read.
Thanks, everybody, for coming today. As I mentioned, my name is David. I'm a retired librarian, retired ex-bookstore owner, and the situation we're in that she mentioned really angers me. This whole idea of book banning went throughout my career every 10 years or so, and now it's back again. So that's why we're gathered here, and we're also here because of an experience a lot of us had last October being at a county board commission meeting. And the librarians were stripped of their professional memberships and stripped of any affiliation with the American Library Association after that meeting. We just don't get it. It's besides ourselves thinking about it. So I said, why don't we do something? That was 11 months ago. So we put this together starting in the spring, early summer, and that was the reasoning for everything. We want to fill that gap. In other words, the public libraries in the county of Sarasota can no longer, how would you say it, shine a spotlight on banned books, on the freedom to read, and on things related to Banned Book Week, which is this week, in fact, ends today, which is Let Freedom Read Day, and that's why we're doing it on this day. I want to do a few hospitality things before I get into some facts that I think will surprise you. If you didn't notice, the bathrooms are to the left out this way. If anybody wants to go hear read-alouds or see a sing-along with Miss Vicki, it's out this way to the right. And let's see what else. In the reception room, we'll have a reception straight out at the Reeb room, R-E-E-B, you'll see that on the door. We'll have some book sales from one or two of Martha's books. We will have some stuff that's free swag from the American Library Association. And because there's a smaller crowd of you, you can take whatever you want. There are 500 bookmarks. There are probably 50 pins and stickers and everything, so you'll have fun with that. And there's also, I believe, going to be some League of Women Voters stuff. And the organization, where is Rich? What is the name again of yours? Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. And there'll be kind of a trifold thing there, and you can talk to Rich about that. And I'm sure all your cell phones are probably on mute. If not, please do that too. And then at the end of our program, after Martha and Liz and Jennifer do their talks, we're going to do a Q&A, and Carrie, Seidman, and I are going to do that. So, just a few things I picked up on the way. It says here, a book ban is an attempt to destroy an idea. The book itself is just a physical manifestation of that idea that opponents can lay their hands on. One of the other things I found was by Jay Handelman, the a very popular writer for the Sarasota Herald Tribune. And he said regarding this topic we're here about, I keep hoping that it will all blow over, that I will wake up tomorrow and we won't be talking about banning books, forcing public libraries to withdraw from national accrediting organizations, and dealing with laws meant to limit our ability to freely live our lives and understand our history. That really says it all, kind of what we're going to talk about today. Martha's going to talk specifically about why are we afraid of teaching true American history. Jennifer's going to talk about her political action organization that helped elect and helps elect around the state of Florida good school board members. And Liz, as you know, will talk about her life and her experiences. This is my favorite newspaper headline of the year. This is real. You can't make this stuff up. A Florida school board has spent more than $100,000 to keep a children's book about a same-sex penguin pair off its library shelves. Plus, they have spent over $250,000 on another lawsuit. One school board. Pretty astonishing. The other way that this book banning stuff affects us as library people, let's say I'm working again, how it affects me or as a working teacher, is that there is some surveillance going on. That's wrong. I mean, let teachers teach and let library people be who they are. And the true goal of people who ban books, mistrust librarians and teachers, and challenge public libraries, the true goal is to dismantle public institutions. That's my quote, but I think it's true. And I think and I hope, the more I think about it, that we do have the community resilience here in Sarasota and the region to tackle this problem, all the problems that have cropped up, no matter who they go back to, and move forward and take some action and do lively civic engagements like this. It's one of the reasons I wanted to do this format, so we can be together and think about it and talk about it, and together we can tackle these problems. By the way, if you want to go to your public library and see the Penguin book, this is it. It's called And Tango Makes Three by Justin Richardson and Peter Parnell, both very well-known authors. There's plenty of copies in the Sarasota system. The last thing I'll mention about our Social Justice Alliance, and then I'll I'll introduce Carrie, is that we call ourselves SJAFS, and we are an action-based collaborative. So we do programs, and some of you may have been at our February book festival. How many were at the February festival we did? Good. We will keep doing this action stuff as long as we have a lot of active members. And there are 16 organizations now that are paired together to pull this stuff off. Oh, I'm so glad that we have Carrie Seidman here today. Carrie was part of that book fest I just mentioned, and she's willing to come back again and speak for a few minutes before our featured speakers. And Carrie, as you know, speaks truth to power in her columns. That's why I love it, and maybe you do too. Carrie is an opinion columnist for the Sarasota Herald Tribune in Sarasota. She's also the creator and producer of Facing Mental Illness, a blog and podcast that shares stories from people with lived mental health experience. She's a graduate of Columbia University School of Journalism and she was a reporter, critic, and columnist for daily newspapers for 45-plus years. As a staff writer for the New York Times, Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, Albuquerque Journal, and Albuquerque Tribune, and Sarasota's papers, she covered a broad range of subjects from sports to arts to mental health in formats ranging from reviews and features to long-form narratives and investigative reporting. The S Word, Seidman's 2015 project on mental illness, received the National Media Award from Mental Health America, the nation's leading community-based nonprofit dedicated to addressing the needs of those living with mental illness. In 2014, Seidman's narrative on a Florida family's return to their native Cuba, home to Havana, received the Florida Society of Newspapers Editors Gold Medal for Public Services. And there are many other awards and many other accolades here that I will not mention. She has also, by the way, received ongoing recognition for her coverage of dance, including fellowship in dance criticism from the New York Times she had and the National Endowment for the Arts. So please welcome Carrie.
Thank you, David, and welcome everyone. David and I were speaking for a few minutes yesterday, and he said, are you okay with me calling your little talk Truth to Power? And I said, well, that's fine, but power doesn't always listen. So I don't necessarily think of myself as someone who speaks truth to power, but often people say that to me. And I was just thinking about experiences in my very long career. I have to take the number of years out of that introduction because it really makes me feel old. But I thought I'd share with you my very first incident of sort of having to confront power. And that was very early in my career. I started my journalism career as a sports writer. And I was working for the New York Times in New York. I had just come there as a baby reporter at 23 years old, and being the lowest person on the sports staff, I was assigned to cover the New Jersey Nets of the National Basketball Association, which probably a lot of you aren't basketball fans that go back that far, but at that time the New Jersey Nets were like the worst team in the country. So part of the routine when you're covering pro basketball on the East Coast, so the New York Times at the time had several different editions, and the final edition closed at like 11:30 at night. So I would have to go to a game, watch the game, and then the routine was all the reporters would go to the locker room, get quotes from the players, and then you'd go back to the press room and you'd write your story. So I did this for the first several games of the season, and then I went up to Boston for a game against the Celtics, and we watched the game, and I and the other reporters, all of whom were male, went to get our quotes, and they wouldn't let me in the locker room. And that was sort of my first experience of being denied access that other people were being given and information. Fortunately, I had the power of the New York Times behind me, and they were on it immediately and threatened a lawsuit, and it never happened again. But, and obviously, whether or not I reported what the New Jersey Nets did that night wasn't critical. Like, I don't know the whole lot of people that were waiting for that news. But it just did sort of underscore for me right from the beginning the importance of me being able to be a provider of accurate information to people, and to be able to confront those kind of situations where I wasn't given free speech or free access to information. Most of the rest of my career, I was a news reporter. So in that case, I wasn't writing subjective commentaries, but I still felt very strongly about my role in gathering, accessing, and providing reliable information for my readers. And so all of that relied on me being able to speak to the people I needed to speak to, get the information I needed to get, and bring it to have a platform to share it with readers. For the last 7 or 8 years, some of you may know I have been the local columnist for the Herald Tribune. And because in a column I'm allowed a lot more freedom in terms of I can have an opinion, as a matter of fact I have to have an opinion, and I can share it, it has given me much more of an opportunity to call people out when I think that that's necessary. But not only do I see my role as holding our public officials accountable, holding people accountable within the community, I also feel like I hope that I use the column to call us all to be accountable, to paying attention, to being involved civically, to using our own power to speak out against things like book banning and so forth. So I try to, that's important for me within my column as well, and I hope that it makes me, I don't feel like I'm any different than anybody in this room. I just feel like maybe I have a little bit more experience accessing information, and I'm very privileged to have the platform to share it with a wide audience. But everyone here has that ability to hold the people in their lives and the elected officials in their lives accountable. And I'm going to segue that into my introduction of our next speaker. I first met Liz Barker early in her campaign for the school board. She was at a small gathering at someone's house speaking about her campaign, and I remember being so impressed with her and also feeling like this is a person who I could be friends with. You know, everything that she spoke about was accessible, it was common sense, it was what I'd been waiting to hear from a potential school board member. And I thought, so many people say to me about my column, you said exactly what I was feeling. You spoke for me. And I felt that Liz in her campaign did the same thing. She was speaking the things that we were all thinking and talking about the things that she'd like to do on the board that we all were wanting. So I don't think Liz needs a lot of introduction. She is a former school psychologist. She's a mother of 4. And as you all know, she will, in November, be our newest school board member. She's been president of her children's school's PTO. She has been a volunteer in the classroom. She has been a strong advocate for public education, and I just couldn't be more pleased to feel like we have something in common. And so I ask you to please welcome Liz Barker.
Thanks so much, Carrie. I am thrilled to be here. Saying that I am your newest school board member-elect still feels really surreal. and also so encouraging. Before I get started, though, I do want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of us have been through trauma in the last couple days. A lot of us have had our homes or businesses impacted by Hurricane Helene, and I want to acknowledge that as a community, we feel that, we are working through that, and I know that this is an opportunity for us to come together and come back even stronger than before, but I'm holding all of you in my heart. So there's that piece. You know what? I think we all have something in common, everyone here. We all care about freedom. We care about the freedom to read, but we also care about the freedom to learn, and we care about the freedom to think critically. And it's because those freedoms were threatened that I decided to run for the school board, because if you had asked me a few years ago, if you had said, hey, Liz, what do you think about running for the school board? I would have said, sorry, is there another Liz here that you're talking to? This is not me. But that changed. That changed the day my oldest daughter came home from school. She was in 6th grade at the time at Pineview, which for those of you who don't know is a gifted magnet school here. And she had just helped her English teacher pack up their classroom library. I said, oh, okay, maybe now you are talking to me. And the reason that that teacher felt the need to do that is because, in part, obviously, because of the ambiguity of the censorship bills that were passed, but also in part because she had received no reassurances from our school board or our leaders that her professionalism would be respected and protected. And it wasn't just Ella's teacher. It was across the county, and I know it was across other counties as well. Our whole state was impacted, and that's completely unacceptable. Our teachers had to err on the side of caution because they received so little guidance, and that I knew I could help change. I'm someone who takes freedom, particularly educational freedom, very seriously, and that's because it wasn't always accessible to me. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household, and I was homeschooled until the 10th grade. During that time, my access to books and curricula, information, it was all very severely restricted, and critical thinking, especially for girls and women, was absolutely not tolerated. In this culture, the curation of information was used to keep young people from questioning the status quo, and it wasn't until I finally convinced my parents to allow me to attend public school in 10th grade that I truly began to learn about the world around me. I had a fundamentalist classical education. Classical is a new hot topic, right? It's the new cool thing to do in education. Well, my friends, I've experienced it, and let me tell you a little bit about classical education. It's very heavy on rote memorization, so that's interesting, right? I could recite all the books of the Bible. I could quote Shakespeare. I knew every United States president in chronological order, but you know what I had no idea about? The Holocaust. Didn't know. I could rattle off multiplication tables. I was a mean multiplication table rattler offer. But now, when I try to help my children with their math homework, you know what I realize? I don't understand the why behind mathematical algorithms. It's really a very big difference. My cursive was impeccable. I mean, swoon-worthy cursive. But it was used to copy Bible verses. I never had the freedom to use written expression to question or analyze or critique. That wasn't part of the curriculum. And science was even worse. My understanding of the natural world was limited to the biblical account of creationism. How many people here have been to the Creation Museum? No? Really? Okay. How many of you even knew it existed? Okay, all right, we're getting somewhere now. Okay, I wouldn't put it on your bucket list, but it's pretty eye-opening. So I truly believed that the Earth was 6,000 years old, and believed that to be the only plausible scientific theory until my first high school biology class. And it was really easy to convince a 10, 11, 12-year-old Liz of that because my access to any other information was so limited. I had no competing narratives to call these ideas into question. I never considered myself to be a college-bound student, and I certainly was not meant to have a career outside of motherhood. And that changed the day I walked into a public school. It was my assigned school counselor who insisted that I take an English honors class, and she refused to believe me. I told her, I said, I don't have any plans for higher. What are you talking about? I'm not going to college. And she said, absolutely you are. We had a little, back and forth for a while. But as my world expanded through that opportunity of experiencing public schools, I began to set goals that I would have absolutely laughed at as a child, and it was thanks to those public school educators that I graduated as valedictorian and did, in fact, pursue college and graduate degrees and a career as a school psychologist. So you can imagine, then, why I am such a passionate advocate for public schools and educational freedom, because it is terrifying how easy it is to shape the worldview of a child when you only present them with one set of ideas and ban any others. I think most of us here recognize the recent attempt by our state government to restrict information under the guise of parental rights as an organized attempt to limit worldview that maintains the current balance of power. I don't know about you, but I have fewer rights than I had 2 years ago. With those of us who are concerned, when we say, gosh, we're really concerned, this seems like blatant censorship, when we talk like that, we are told, oh my gosh, what about the porn in kindergarten classrooms? Or that maybe it's just a hoax, right? The book banning hoax, it doesn't exist. But the truth is startling. In 2023, a record-setting 4,240 unique titles were targeted for censorship, and that represents a 128% increase from 2021. It's no surprise that almost half of those titles featured LGBTQ+ stories and characters. Here in Sarasota, we always are reminded, right? Especially when you talk to most of our school board members, we're reminded that we haven't actually banned any books, and we're very proud of that. Great, good, we should be, and it's true. We have not seen a successful book challenge or resulting removal, but you know what's also true? We are restricting books and information in other ways. And really, in many ways, what we've done has been far less transparent than an actual book ban process. So I want to tell you about some of the experiences just my family has encountered in the last year or two, but I know you probably have more, and I think it's so important that we talk about these, because without transparency and without speaking truth to power, we're never going to make headway. So the first one, some of you may, I've spoken about this before, as the PTO president, we do the book fair every year, and I was helping set out the cases, and I said to my volunteers, I said, gosh, it looks like we have fewer books than we had the past year. What's going on with that? Book fair is chaotic. We made our way through. It wasn't until after the book fair was over that I learned I was right. We did have fewer books, in fact, and that was because Scholastic had created a separate category of books, and it was called Share Every Story, Celebrate Every Voice, and it segregated out those books that featured diverse voices. And out of a fear of doing the wrong thing, we had no guidance, the parent volunteer in charge said, it's just too risky. It's just too risky, and that's something that I hear repeated constantly, it's just too risky. So we didn't have titles like I Am Ruby Bridges, they weren't available to our students, and it also meant that they weren't available to teachers to add to their classroom libraries either, and that is self-censorship, pure and simple. It only happens due to the restrictive atmosphere around access to books. Another parent told me at her kids' book fairs are problematic. In the past, I'm sure all of us have done this sometimes, right? We slip a 20 when we're checking out our books because we know there's got to be other kids in the class that didn't bring money for the book fair and maybe could use that money. And she was turned down. She was turned down because their school were concerned that volunteers could not help other children pick books. So her charitable giving at the book fair was deemed too risky. We saw impacts on our school-wide literacy initiatives. In the past, the PTO held various contests and awards for students who read that current year's Sunshine State Readers. The PTO also historically purchased copies of the award-winning books for our media center, but that program was also a casualty of self-censorship. Our principal worried that it was too risky. Another example, and this one is odd because I only noticed it because I had 2 children at right the exact years. In 2022, my older daughter, Ella, had a 5th grade history project with a list of books to choose from. They were all historical fiction. My younger daughter, Emmy, had the same project 2 years later, and they gave us the same list of books, but this time, multiple titles were blacked out. No reason was provided except that it was too risky. Last year, Ella was taking 7th grade civics, again at that magnet program, and we signed a permission slip. The parents, we have been permission slipped to death, by the way, but we signed a permission slip to allow her teacher to use the Upfront magazine. It's by the New York Times. It is a award-winning journalism meant to help children discuss current events. And I signed the slip, but we were notified a few days later by the principal that the magazine could not be used because it was too risky. That's right. So despite the fact, now I've been told I have more rights than I've ever had before. I've been told parental rights are of utmost importance, but the fact is I explicitly gave permission for my daughter to have access to this resource, and it was still censored. But that magazine and those books that were blacked out, and Ruby Bridges will never appear on a list of banned books because it was never officially banned. And yet our children were denied access. And that's happening all over our district. When a book is removed from school libraries without a challenge, it is not counted as a banned book, and yet it is just as unavailable in our school system. As a result, many of you probably don't know that a portion of Rick Riordan's books, he's the one who does Percy Jackson, great YA books. A lot of his books were removed from our libraries in Sarasota County for content, and the only reason we know that is because a FOIA request led to that discovery, but there's really no reason to ban that book, or it hasn't even officially been banned, it'll never show up on a list of banned books, but to remove it from our libraries, except that when I was researching and saying, well gosh, what did Percy Jackson ever do to anybody? Turns out there is a non-binary character in one of the books. So one can't help but wonder, was that alone the reason? Given that there was no other obvious reason to remove them, and without a more transparent process, all we can do is wonder. Removing books like these have impacts beyond restricting information. When we take books with diverse characters off the shelves, we offer fewer books that every student can see themselves in, and frankly, when we insist that every book have educational value, we also lose the idea of reading for fun. At a moment when we're trying to improve our reading scores, it's worth remembering that a part of doing that is just getting kids to read more. It can be painful at my house too, I know. And it is okay if not of all that reading is super serious or what we think they should be reading. If they're excited about it, if it makes reading feel like less of a burden, I'm all for it. So losing those books means losing our kids' interest in reading, and that's part of the equation as well. And I'm sure there are other examples out there, but that's just what my own family has experienced in the last couple years, and we need to work together to demand transparency around our decisions here. We can't confront the chilling effects of these laws without understanding that self-censorship is also imposed on ourselves. A recent survey of teachers found that weak leadership and lack of administrative support are a significant factor when teachers have felt the need to limit or alter their instruction. And this environment is also having an impact on our teachers' feelings towards the profession. Around the country, 82% of teachers believe conditions in K-12 education have worsened in the last 5 years, with most seeing the political climate as the primary cause. And that's not hard to see why. We see it right here. And when there are a contingent of parents and politicians accusing our educators of being secret indoctrinators and pornography peddlers, it's no surprise that they feel disrespected and under attack. It's a natural response to that attack to begin to self-censor, no matter how little they may want to. But you know what? The burden for this shouldn't be on our teachers to fix. We need administrators who will support our teachers and provide them with resources, and the support to teach effectively. If we don't make this change, we will continue to see dedicated educators leave the profession as we have in recent years. And we saw it at our last school board meeting. Our superintendent said the teacher shortage is impacting us. We're hiring contractors because we cannot find anyone to fill these positions. This is happening, and it's preventable. So that leads me into when teachers talk about what makes their profession so difficult being politics. Does anyone here, can anyone give me a little brief snapshot on what Amendment 1 seeks to do? Any takers? Oh, yes, back there.
Amendment 1 is trying to make school boards partisan.
Yes. So our state legislature is attempting to make all future school board elections partisan. Now, we've seen here in Sarasota and in a lot of other places around the state exactly what happens when politics comes to the door of the school building. And, you know, quite frankly, I'm not sure that we will see another election cycle like we just had in August if Amendment 1 passes. I don't know that we will, because even my election, I was an unknown candidate. I was a Democrat. And I was facing an incumbent who had the backing of an extremely strong party. She was in a position of leadership. She was the school board chair, and she was a career educator in our county. I shouldn't have had a chance in you know what, but I did. And why was that? It was because our community came together and we said, we've had enough. And we don't care about our party. We saw firsthand what happens when politics enters the classroom. We saw the havoc that politically motivated board members brought to our educational institutions, and we sent a clear message that this was not the future we wanted for our public schools. So, I'm asking you to help me here. I have not heard much talk about Amendment 1, and I think it needs to be top of mind for all of us. If we truly want to make progress in this state, if we value public education, if we value freedom to information, then we absolutely cannot make these races partisan. There are so many problems with it. The biggest one in my mind is that we are disenfranchising about 30% of our population here in Sarasota doesn't affiliate with either party. They're non-party affiliates, and they will be unable to vote in our primaries because it's a closed primary state. So 30% of parents are not going to get to cast a vote in August primaries if Amendment 1 passes. And then, of course, the very obvious is that we shouldn't be deciding who makes decisions about our schools based on the letter that comes after their name. That doesn't make sense. We need people who are invested and care about education and can work together. So, my ask of you is this. Those same people that you spoke to about me, those same people that you got to vote, that maybe didn't share your party, that maybe didn't share all your opinions about everything, talk to them about Amendment 1. Because I am willing to bet that there are many, many, many folks in our community who understand how dangerous that would be to our schools and to freedom for education in general. So please speak to those people, and while you're at it, do me one more favor. Can you also talk to them about the referendum? Because this is the first time that our referendum that helps fund our schools and has helped fund our schools for over 20 years, it's the first time that it will be on the November ballot. And it's going to be all the way at the bottom, folks. Like, just keep scrolling. Keep going. But it is so critically important that we continue to fund our public schools, because guess what? The state isn't going to do it for us. The state is actively working to privatize public education. And so we, as a community who value our schools, we have to be willing to stand up and say, you know, we will continue to fund them. We will not allow ourselves to be distracted by all the political nonsense that these folks are bringing. We care about our schools, we care about our children, and we will continue to protect and fund them. It makes up about 20% of our budget. So if you think about your own budgets, what it would look like if you had a 20% slash, that's what it would look like to our schools. So please understand how important that is. All of us here care so deeply about the future of public education, and I think the August elections were an encouraging indicator that we aren't alone. We have to take every opportunity to reject political extremism and educational censorship and work towards a cooperative, inclusive future for the next generation. And while there is much work to be done, and I've given you homework now, there is also so much to be hopeful about. And I look forward to everything we'll accomplish together. Thank you.
That was a wow. One of the things I was thinking about as I was sitting there, I don't know what you were thinking about, but this is a right or left question, but it's more about right or wrong. The right or wrong is really important, and that goes back to why do we have to take action and follow what we think is right or wrong. Our next speaker is Martha Bireda, who happens to live in Punta Gorda. She's a sixth-generation Floridian and a descendant of one of the founding families in Punta. Martha grew up there and attended the old Baker Academy and finished Booker High School in Sarasota as the valedictorian. Another valedictorian. She returned to Punta Gorda in 2001 to honor her mother, Bernice Andrew Russell's vision to establish an African American museum in Punta Gorda. The Blanchard House Museum of African American History and Culture of Charlotte County opened in May 2004. Presently, Dr. Bireda is director of that Blanchard House Museum. She is frequently a public speaker, lecturer, and a living history reenactor. Before her retirement, Martha worked 30 years plus as a consultant and trainer for issues related to race, class, gender, cultural diversity, and empowerment issues. She's the author of 14 books, the latest being Reflections of a Colored Girl, accounts her experiences and lessons learned growing up in the Jim Crow South. Besides all those things, Martha tells me that she considers her greatest accomplishment to be her kids. Jaha, a graduate of Dartmouth College, a businessman in Asia for 20 years, and a city councilman for the city of Punta Gorda for 3 terms. And her daughter, Saba, a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law School, and an attorney in Washington, D.C., and now the co-founder of Brown's Promise, a special nonprofit. If you want to write that down and look it up, there are some videos online of Brown's Promise. Martha and I were on WSLR radio, the community radio station, this past week, and she also hit it out of the park with her backstory of growing up and being a part of the community of Sarasota. So would you please welcome Martha Bireda.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. Yes, I do have this relationship and affinity with Sarasota, having gone to school here from 7th to 12th grade, Booker High School. And during Hurricane Charlie, came over and spent a year while my house was being repaired. So I still have a love for Sarasota, Newtown, Booker High School. And David, I must say, I have to give Charlotte County some credit here. Our Punta Gorda Charlotte Library has observed Ban the Book Weeks all week. There are books on the shelves, and guess what? There's even a contest for the person who reads the most banned books. So that's Charlotte. Love it. Okay. No, in fact, I said something to the main person. I said, "Aren't you afraid to do that?" He said, "It's take care of this library." So it didn't. So there are some brave people around there, and so I trust that when I talk to you next year, that you all will be able to have a contest as well. In fact, I dare you have a contest as well. All right. I'd like to talk to you briefly about why the fear of teaching true American history. And I'm going to give you 3 events or 3 examples, and I want you to think about what is in common with each of these 3. First of all, why were enslaved blacks, why did they not have the freedom to learn to read? Secondly, why did students in black segregated schools not have the freedom to have equal educational opportunities? And here in the 21st century, I have to ask you, why is it that our current generation of students do not have the freedom to learn true American history? The answers for each of those are the same. Has to do with preserving power, the status quo, and preserving the ideology of white supremacy. All of those are the same. And what method are we using now? There is so much energy now to preserve white supremacy that it is unreal. It is unreal. And the way that it's being done is the way it's been done for over 300 years, through narrative versus history. So I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about the difference. I'm going to distinguish between narrative related to history versus history, which is truth. First of all, history records events, the broad scheme of events, the socio-historical process that's involved. When we talk about narrative related to history, we get an account of events that contain omissions, distortions, mythology, and even lies. Now, a historical narrative or a narrative related to history is a set of predetermined ideas and beliefs by a particular group that are culturally conditioned over generations. Now, this group only wants you to know this part of the way they interpret history. They only want us to know that narrative. And so any critical thinking, anything that makes you want to, they close it out. And right now, it is very, very serious. The determination to do this, again, right now, there's this other factor, the fear factor. Fear right now. This has become just really very intense. I, as you heard David say, worked in, I was a consultant, did cultural sensitivity training, and in the 90s, we used to talk about what was going to happen in 2050, the browning of America. And the work we were doing with teachers was to say, all right, you're going to have a diverse population of students, so you need to be able to learn how to most effectively teach all the students. Well, that kind of circulated through the years, and now we've got something called replacement theory. And when you're talking about all of these brown people especially coming, you have the black people, brown ones, yellow ones, red ones, the fear of losing the ideology and the practices of white supremacy are just really right here in front of us. And so with that said, what I'm going to do now is talk about or distinguish between the narratives and history. Let me say this. I was doing the work in 1994. I was the race and gender coordinator for the Southeastern Equity Center. And what we did was to work with school districts. You know, they were trying to do the desegregation, and we would work with the district to make sure that they followed the law and they got unitary status. I happened to be in Miami in 1994 when the African American Task Force was meeting. I was there when that first task force met. And let me say, they put together a curriculum that was outstanding for the state of Florida. I was there when it happened. 2021, there are some changes, and of course, 2023. And David, part of all those heavy books you were carrying, I've gotten those curriculums from 94, 21, and 23. I had to see the 2023 myself. I had to see the changes that happened. And so let us start with the first narrative, a very, very disturbing narrative. This is about teaching African American history. The narrative: white children will be forced to feel guilt, anguish, or other forms of psychological distress for the actions in which they played no part committed in the past by members of the same race or sex. Okay? Now this bill, this new thing, this talking about this, is supposedly written to protect white children from any of this discomfort or guilt. But in reality, all it is perpetuating white supremacy ideology. Because, first of all, this bill denies white children the freedom to learn true, accurate American history. They're denied the right. It denies them the right to gain the knowledge so that they can think critically about history. It denies them the freedom to analyze the benefits of motivated racial policies. It prevents white children from learning how racial indoctrination works, how this cultural conditioning works, and how it's worked over generations. This bill, very importantly, will deny white children the freedom to learn that every white person does not believe in white supremacy. They will learn about people who gave their lives for the equality of others. But if you don't teach accurate history, they will never know about those people. Or they will hear something like, I'm having a blank. Harper's Ferry. Tell me who it is. John Brown. You know, everybody thinks that he was just a crazy man. No, he was a person who was committed to equality. He didn't have his army wasn't big enough, but his mind, his consciousness was right. They'll hear, I saw the Jim Reeb room here. They'll learn about people like him who was involved in the civil rights struggle. So if you teach accurate American history, white children will learn that every white person is not a person who believes in that. And that is very important for them to learn that. They need to learn how Black Americans who were oppressed and are still oppressed by stereotypical images, how despite that African Americans, Black people, were able to move beyond that. Most importantly, a white child who does not learn accurate American history cannot make clear, critical decisions about racial beliefs and attitudes that shape his or her character and has been forced upon them, and I mean it, forced upon them by generation to generation. That cultural conditioning. Now, we say, oh goodness, if we teach accurate history, if we teach this narrative, not accurate history, we teach this narrative, oh boy, Black children will feel so bad about themselves, they'll feel like victims, and they just won't know what to do. Give me a break. It will be the opposite. Black children will learn how Black people resisted enslavement and especially in the state of Florida, I didn't learn about, how many of you know about maroon communities? Know about the Maroons? Raise your hand if you know about the Maroons. I got to see this.
Jamaica?
Huh?
The Maroons from Jamaica?
There were Maroons in Jamaica, but guess what? 10 miles from me on Pine Island, there were Maroons. There were Maroons right outside of Sarasota, Angola. Florida was the place that the enslaved slaves to come, they came here and formed maroon communities. And so why would black children be feeling like this when they heard about people who escaped slavery, South Carolina and Georgia, came to Florida, established what were maroon communities where they did their own African religion, their own culture? Why would they be ashamed? Now, this little book I wrote years ago. Now, right now, I'm sure that if I were a popular author, it would be banned, or it would not be on your shelf. No, because it's called Obi, Seminole Maroon Freedom Fighter. Now, when the escaped enslaved, they came here, they joined with the Creek, and they made the Seminoles. That's how we got the Seminoles. So if the kids read this book, they would learn that, oh no, Obi and his friends, they didn't want to learn all those skills that slavery could teach them. They wanted to escape and be free, and that's what they would learn. If we taught accurate history, then those whole stereotypes about the image of African American intellectual inferiority, cultural inferiority, moral inferiority, that could be refuted. Kids could read books like this, Black Men in Science. Yeah, this would be something they read. But one of my very favorite books that I think would be a wonderful book to read in kindergarten to all children is something called Your Legacy, a bold reclaiming of our enslaved history. It just goes through and it just talks, it's a beautiful book for all children. It talks about, but then it talks about love and intellect. All of these, determination. This is a wonderful kindergarten book for all children because, yes, they could see it in African Americans, but they could see it in their own families because actually we are all connected. We are one. We are connected. And so if we taught accurate American history, then all children, all of our children would learn the truth about who they are and who others are. Now, the next narrative we have, and I have to read it because I had to go and look at myself. I couldn't believe this. Enslaved people developed skills which in some instances could be applied to their personal benefit. Okay. But no, there's more. In addition to agricultural work, and I want you to keep in mind these that I'm mentioning, okay? Especially agricultural work. In addition to agricultural work, enslaved people learned specialized trades and worked as painters, carpenters, tailors, musicians, and healers in the North and South. Once free, African Americans used these skills to provide for themselves and others. Isn't it amazing what slavery can do? Oh my God. You think we should bring it back or something? I mean, just think now what we can learn. All right. That was the narrative, okay? Now, that's written. I had to read that myself, okay? That is the narrative. But let me give you the history. The majority of African Americans who came here as enslaved came from West Central Africa. And there were 3 empires, believe it or not, in West Central Africa from whence the ancestors of the enslaved people came. There was one in Ghana from the 7th to the 13th century, one in Mali from the 13th to the 15th century, and one in Sinai from the 15th to 16th century. Now, I have to ask this question because I don't know the answer, but maybe some of you know, because some of you, many of you probably have European backgrounds, right? Tell me about the climate and the environment in Europe. Is it possible to grow rice in Europe? No? So You mean that the Europeans who were here, who got the slaves, they didn't know the technical skills for teaching the enslaved how to plant rice? Oh, that's interesting. No, it's interesting because 43% of the Africans who were brought here came from the rice lands in Africa. They were deliberately chosen because in Africa they had been growing rice for over 1,500 years. They had grown cotton, they had grown indigo. And so when you think about who learned what skills, I'm talking about the technical skills of growing rice, how you have to swamp the fields and when you do this and that. Who taught who about that? No, seriously. You saw what I read in the new curriculum. Who taught who how to do that? In addition, talking about technology, iron technology was used during those years. We're talking 1,500 years ago. We're talking years and years ago, centuries ago. Africans developed the technology to use to be better farmers. Agricultural technology came from those same people who were enslaved in this country. They brought it with them, okay? Now, this one is interesting. The enslaved healers found at least 45 African herbs when they came to South Carolina. So I'll let you think about that. If they came in the 1700s, how did those herbs get here before then? Okay, but just think about that. Now, the healers who came here, believe it or not, removing tumors, setting broken bones, these were things that were done in Africa. And the thing that is most interesting, I think all of us knew about the smallpox epidemic, especially in the colonies in 1700s. People were dying here and there. Well, Cotton Mather had an enslaved man, Onesimus. And Onesimus saw this happening and he went to Cotton Mather. He said, "Master, I think I can help you with this." And Cotton Mather said, "Okay." Guess what? The first inoculation in this country was developed by an African man because it had been used in Ghana for centuries. That's what I'm talking about. Who brought skills to America? Africa is known for the earliest mathematical measuring tools and calculation, astronomy. Africans melted iron over 2,500 years ago. And believe it or not, African art influenced Western art, especially Pablo Picasso. We got rock painting, kente cloth, all of that. Now, we only think about drums, but guess where the first string instruments were developed? In Africa. In Africa. All right. Now, can anybody tell me one of the first universities in the world where it was located? Anybody heard of Timbuktu? Timbuktu. In the 1100s. In the 1100s. That was in Africa. And so, if you started teaching accurate history, then kids would read books like this, African History for Kids, a captivating guide to the history of Africa. They could read stuff like this. All right, but check this one out. This is really the fascinating one for me. My daughter, Africa had the oldest and the greatest architectural masterpieces. They were found in Africa, believe it or not. It was not all, and I'm gonna show you some pictures, not all little huts, okay? When the European went there, they went to cities. That's where they went. But my daughter lives in DC, and my married name, I'm divorced now, is Ethiopian. And there are a bunch of Ethiopians that live in DC. And usually, if she can't pick me up, I get an Uber driver, and he's an Ethiopian. But this particular time, I got a driver whose accent was different. And as we're passing by all of these monuments and whatnot, the driver says, we built those. And I kind of look at him and I think, well, does he mean like his ancestors who were enslaved here built those? Because you know the White House and the Capitol all were built by enslaved people, okay? Now I want you to think about, oh God, where did those primitive people learn to build those kind of monuments? I just think about it. All right. So my cab driver had a different accent, so I said to him, where are you from? He said, Benin. Oh my Lord. When he said Benin, and you can see for yourself, Benin had built a wall larger than the wall of China. And you can come up and check all this out or go on internet and see it yourself. Also, Zimbabwe and Benin, okay? So when he said to me, we built those, he wasn't talking about during enslavement. He was talking about centuries ago. So when I read that about the skills, where did the skills come from to build masterpieces in Washington, like the masterpieces in Africa? Who brought those skills? They did not come here without intellect at all. They came with technical knowledge and skills. If we teach accurate history, we can refute the stereotypical myth of African American intellectual, cultural, and moral inferiority. So, now, my final one. There was another narrative. It said the Ocoee Massacre was another other racially motivated attacks included acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans. Okay. You know what happened when the troops pulled out of the South? The violence against African Americans just was huge. Mob attacks, massacres, lynchings. Blacks did not instigate those attacks against themselves. They did not instigate attacks against whites. However, because those men had come back from fighting in World War I, they did have weapons. They did engage in self-defense. According to white supremacy ideology, blacks are not to have guns or to defend themselves. So again, there was a narrative that was written there that absolutely has no truth to it. So those three narratives that are put in this curriculum in Florida, we must not let lies be told to our children. Our children don't deserve that. They deserve more. So why is the teaching of accurate and true American history important? First of all, it builds empathy. It builds appreciation of the experiences and the lives of others. It builds compassion. There's something called human completion. And human completion is, as we develop, we become more human, more human. The most developed humans are those with empathy, compassion, and are able to see individuals and not judge individuals by a stereotype that's put on a group. They are the most human. Anything other than that is that we have not climbed yet to full human completion. If we teach true American history, we can appreciate the culture and the ideas and the traditions that are not our own. We can share them, and we can see how we can work together. If we teach true American history, we will become aware of both African and African American contributions to the world and to world history. If we teach true American history, we can confront racism and discrimination. We can, most important, promote critical thinking and the connection between the past and the present so we can improve the future. We can inspire a generation of activists, and I'm going to tell you something very quickly about that. We can encourage better citizenship. History can heal. we can help heal our nation's wounds if we just teach accurate history. Okay. The last time I was really able to travel, it was before that, went to Germany and had the wonderful good fortune of talking to German youth. Believe it or not, German youth are the reason that they teach true German history, the reason that they teach the Holocaust. In Germany, you have to learn the good, the bad, the ugly. You have to learn all of it. But you know what? Those kids don't hate Germany. Those kids don't feel guilt and shame. They feel proud because that learning the true healing, talking about it, it healed that guilt and shame. So the German people can say, yes, we did that, but it will not happen again. German kids, they watched what happened here in the civil rights movement and with the women's movement, and they forced, actually their government, we must learn. Now if you go to Germany, if you see a certain house and there's a plaque or something, that was a house that was owned by a Jew. On field trips, the kids have to go and see that. They had to learn the true history. And so, that being the case, history can heal. If we want to heal our nation, if we want our children to be those who carry on the principles of the country that we say we're supposed to be, we will teach them true American history. Our children deserve it. They can do it if we as educators, librarians, and parents, and I am very much interested. I keep what's in front of me right now. Don't let other parents I have to put my glasses on again. Don't let other parents tell you what your child can read. No, we need parent groups to do that. Just the way a certain parent group can go in and say, oh, no, none of these books, can't have them. We need parents, oh, no. Now, you may put them in a separate room if you want, in a list, but my child, I want my child to be a critical thinker. I want my child to be able to learn to read and to think about things and have discussions. You don't have the right to deny my child the right to read, to learn, or to be a critical thinker, as you said. I'm so happy that you are on the school board here because, as you know, valedictorians, hot dog. And so let me say to you, as one valedictorian to another, she's your person. You keep her in office. She's a valedictorian. Thank you. I'm done, David.
Thank you for your passion, Martha. You remind me of a quote I wrote down sometime about from Heather Cox Richardson. Excuse me, I should use the mic here. My favorite political historian. Journalists tell you what happened, but historians tell you why it matters. So our third speaker is Jennifer Jenkins. She came all the way from Brevard County this morning. I'm so happy that she said yes. In fact, I forgot to say this in the intro. All three of these speakers, when I asked them, would you speak for something in September? Every one of them said, I'd love to. And I thought, boy, is that a good omen. And so these are three can-do people. And Jennifer is a mom, an educator, and a school board member until November, at least, in Brevard County. Jenkins has made national headlines for defeating Moms for Liberty co-founder Tina Tuskovich. In fact, she beat her by nearly 10 points. in a district that Donald Trump won by double digits, and for championing unbiased public education at her great personal cost. Her powerful advocacy and national platform have landed her as Governor Ron DeSantis' #1 target of Democratic officials to defeat in 2024. And her strong voice for LGBTQ+ rights in Florida schools made her a national target for extremists who have leveled threats on her life and harm to her family, including protests at her home, vandalism of her property, and threats to her child. And she will tell you more stories in particular about that. Jennifer has inspired millions by standing up to these vicious attacks and physical intimidation against her and her family, never giving up and maintaining the confidence that she represented the beliefs of the overwhelming majority of her community. She lives in Satellite Beach with her husband, who is a middle school history teacher, yay, and her daughter, Olive, who is attending Brevard Public Schools. So please welcome Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It is an honor to be with all of you today. I never planned a life journey where I would drive 3 hours across the state and be able to speak to complete strangers about the journey that I've been on. I was just an educator, married to a teacher, sick and tired of making $38,000 a year with a master's degree, tired of being disrespected, who just simply wanted to advocate for a profession that I loved. I couldn't have imagined the experiences that would force me to sink or swim as an individual, to grow as a young woman, a wife, and a mom. So often when people are given a platform to speak, we always talk about our successes. But I argue that too infrequently do we get to reflect or share on our failures and struggles that lead us to these moments of success. Because it's in these stories that we can better relate to one another and appreciate being grounded in a true, genuine purpose and integrity. These human moments that inspire others to join you on your shared journey. So I'm going to take a moment to share mine with all of you. I was born and raised in Staten Island, New York, and almost immediately after I was born, my mom was diagnosed with a debilitating disability. She struggled for years to get a diagnosis. Her days were completely unpredictable. One day she would be completely fine. The next day she would have double vision and couldn't see, or she couldn't walk, or she couldn't speak clearly. My father was a new law enforcement officer, and he suddenly found himself working 2 or 3 jobs, sometimes overnights and on the weekends, just to support our family. So as a teenager, I begged my parents to get a part-time job to contribute, but my mom would literally call my interviews and cancel them. Because my parents insisted that school was my job, my only job. And they instilled in my brother and I that our priority was our education. It was expected that we go to college and preferably graduate with a graduate degree. And as a child, I remember going with my mom to the College of Staten Island back when you used to have to go in person to register for classes. But her illness was so unpredictable, it ultimately hindered her from graduating. And even though my mom wasn't one to share her feelings with me very often or freely, she would often express to me it was one of her biggest disappointments in life. So eventually, I applied and was accepted to a well-known business school in Manhattan because naturally, like every other teenager in New York City, I saw myself as a CEO on Wall Street with a fancy briefcase just rolling in a ton of money. But it was just 2 short months before classes began when my parents dropped a bomb on me. They were moving to Florida. And because of my mother's health, I made a rash decision to follow them. I attended UCF in Orlando. I lived by myself off campus. It was a difficult adjustment. I was lonely. I missed the only home and friends that I've ever known. I was anxious and depressed, and I struggled to get to class, to perform academically, to find a real joy and passion in my education. I was embarrassed and ashamed. And I didn't want to tell my family that my job, my only job, I was failing at. But I eventually had no choice because after 1 year of college, I failed out. Not a valedictorian like my two friends over here. And in that moment, I truly felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling, that this moment was going to define my life forever. Well, it did, just not in the way that I thought it would. My parents made a deal with me. If I moved to Brevard County and got my AA degree at the local community college, they would move me back to New York. And so I very quickly jam-packed my schedule with over 20 credits in a semester with classes I couldn't care less about. They had to just fit in my schedule and get me out of here. But you see, little did I realize was the ground beneath me crumbling actually became a pathway of stepping stones to a future I could have never predicted. Because one of those random classes was an elementary education course that would change my life forever. I actually ended up meeting my husband in that class. But it was also my first experience visiting a Title I school, and I will never forget that drive to Cocoa, Florida. It was a community that clearly was not a priority for the county, a school that did little to hide from the outside exterior, how it disrespected and devalued the community and the children that were inside of it. But what stuck with me was the contrast when I walked inside of that building. I will never forget that day walking into Miss Wilcox's kindergarten class, her true, genuine passion for her craft, her kindness, her empathy, her understanding for her students. I have found comfort to know that the adults inside of that building had not and would not forget that every single child deserves an equal opportunity, that education was the most important piece of that puzzle. That day opened up a passion for the world of education for me, and that's exactly how I find myself with you here today. I eventually received my master's degree and immediately began working with Brevard Public Schools and Title I schools. And years later, I attended a board meeting in solidarity with hundreds of BPS teachers, all wearing red for ed, fighting for respectful raises. And it was then I realized that the people who were sitting on that dais didn't reflect the values of an organization that I loved so deeply. So I literally Googled how to become a school board member, and I walked across the street to the supervisor of elections, and I filed to run for office. And as David said, in 2020, in a very, very red county, much like yours, Donald Trump won that county by 17 points, but I defeated the well-known Republican incumbent by nearly 10. And this is the moment when I tell people that I always apologize. I am so sorry that I gave Tina Deskovich time on her hands to create the monstrosity of Moms for Liberty. So very quickly, I found myself literally living behind enemy lines, the birthplace of public education culture wars, and I was enemy number one. They protested my name at every single board meeting. They hung a king-size sheet with blood red lettering with my name on it. They posted myself and my family's location on neighborhood apps. They protested in front of my home multiple times. They vandalized my property. They sent me death threats. I was escorted to and from my car by law enforcement every meeting. I was told which bathrooms to use to avoid certain areas. And I was instructed that should gunfire break out in our board meeting, to simply duck because our dais is bulletproof. They went as far as to file a false DCF claim where I had to take an investigator to my 5-year-old daughter's play date to look underneath her clothing for burn marks to prove that I wasn't abusing her. And does anyone know State Representative Randy Fine? Oh, you're lucky. This is usually where the audience goes, boo! We call him not so fine at my house. He followed me with 2 private investigators. He made a website falsely claiming I was having an affair. He disseminated it hundreds, if not thousands of times. And he publicly branded me as mentally ill, a child abuser, and a whore. He brought Ron DeSantis to Brevard County for a press conference so he could tell the world that there was a special place in hell for me. And This was all happening in a silo way before it was happening anywhere else. Unfortunately, I witnessed the beginning of how public education became the battleground that Republicans chose to wage a war on democracy. I'm often praised by people for my strength, and in a strange way, I feel guilty, because the reality is, this was the hardest experience of my life. I cried every single day. You can ask him. I threatened to quit my job at least once a week, probably more. This experience distorted my safe haven and my reality. And I never get to share this story, but during the worst of it all, my husband and I received a bang on the door late one night. And it's a terrible memory for more than one reason. We were told in that moment that Sam's dad suddenly had passed away. We called him Poppy. He lived with us for years until our daughter Olive was born. He was literally our best friend. But the other terrible thing was that as I walked towards the door, as my husband's receiving this information, I had pre-dialed 911 on my cell phone, because there was something inside of me that was terrified that this was a sadistic prank and that somebody was posing as a police officer. I couldn't even live in that horrific moment because of the things that had taken place. So the reality is yes, I pushed through, but also I was simply just trying to survive. But I also had to think about my daughter, and I had to remind myself that if I didn't, she would grow up in an educational system that demonized her teachers, labeling them as indoctrinators and groomers. A system that would whitewash history and diminish the contributions of African Americans in our curriculums and our books. A system where little girls will have no guidance to talk about what an inappropriate touch is, what a rape is, what a period is. A system that was seeking to erase the LGBTQ community from our student bodies and our faculties. And a system that would spend more time trying to ban access to bathrooms before weapons that kill our children in their schools. I continued to fight because I watched as the Republican Party across this country continued to pull out the Ron DeSantis handbook, one that didn't just seek to rewrite our history, but aimed to ensure we relive the darkest parts of it. The last 4 years, I have committed my efforts towards fiercely advocating for equitable and unbiased public education. I have witnessed extremist perspectives, representative of a minority of voices, infiltrate our school boards and bleed into our state legislative agendas. And I have refused to be silenced by relentless harassment and intimidation campaigns. I fought tirelessly for my colleagues, my students, and the profession I swore to promote. I defeated the founder of Moms for Liberty once, and I'm gonna do it again. Just 4 months ago, I founded an organization called Educated We Stand. It's a national political organization that's going on the offense, developing researched, poll-tested, state, regional, and national messaging to support our pro-public education officials and community-resistant groups already on the ground. And we're recruiting, electing, and protecting school board candidates across the state of Florida and other battleground states. We had the honor of supporting Tom Edwards and Liz Barker in their races in August. And I in no way want to claim responsibility for their wins, but Liz, I fought so hard with my team to support you. They were terrified to come to Sarasota County. But I knew that you could do it. We were able to not only provide Liz a direct contribution of $1,000 to her campaign, but we were also able to fund an $8,000 text messaging campaign to reach out directly to Democrats, independents, and female Republicans in Sarasota County to help drive out the vote. I am so proud of you, and I am so grateful for you, and I am so proud and grateful for your parents for sending you to public school. The reality is, I get to do a lot of interviews and I brag about your race, even though I claim no ownership in it. But it's really important, and it sends a really, really important message, not just across the state of Florida, but quite frankly, across the United States. Because your race is an example of what Educated We Stand hopes that our voters across the country will learn. When voters learn the candidates who support the extremist agendas are, they lose, regardless of the historical political makeup of that area. And that's really, really, really significant. Never stop spreading that message. Because if you can win here, and I can win in Brevard County, we can win anywhere. I am committed to continue to fight, and this is my selfish pitch, although it's really selfless, I guess, when you think of it in the long run. But Educated We Stand is fully based on grassroots donations. I'm really, really proud of what we've been able to accomplish in just 4 months. We raised $250,000 as a nobody. I have no political experience. It's been incredible. But one of the things that you brought up, Liz, that I'm really excited that you brought up was Amendment 1. And one of the initiatives that we really want to take on for the November election is to be able to put out messaging for encouraging voters to vote no on Amendment 1, to ensure that we keep politics outside of our classrooms. And there really isn't anyone working on that. So if you are comfortable and you're able to donate, please feel free. You can visit us at educatedwestand.com. And thank you for having me. It was such a wonderful day, and I appreciate the both of you so much. Thank you.
David, may I just make one comment to Jennifer or to the audience regarding history? During Jim Crow, African Americans, the same thing that you're going through now, if we got, there was a place for us. If we got out of our place, this is what happened. If you didn't take off your hat, if you didn't get off the sidewalk, but if you had the nerve to stand up, this is what happened. I have to praise you and respect you for understanding that your place is larger than what they say it is. Thank you. That's what happened.
Thank you to all three of you. Is this mic on? No. Dick or Doug, can I have a little sound here on the handheld? Hello. Let's give a hand to these three folks. We've got time for some questions and answers, and that's what we're going to do. I want to mention one other thing that I really wanted to find time for before in the intro, and that is a story. I'm not going to tell you the story because it's too long, but this is a story how 22,000 books, because of HB 1069 and its fuzzy, muddy language, were sent back from Duval County to the state of Iowa to the distributor, because the librarians and media center people were not sure whether they were going to be penalized if they found something in these batches of books that were not good. So there is another example, and the story is a long, beautiful story. If you find me at the reception, I'll tell you the story, of another example. If Governor DeSantis says we don't ban books, it's just not true. When my grandchild and my child does not have access to a book or books, let alone 22,000 from Jacksonville, that's book banning. So just keep that in mind. And why don't we go have some questions? Who would like to ask whomever a question? Anybody? Okay.
This isn't a question, but a note of appreciation for all that you've said, and to our historian, all of the good points you made. I would just add another, that we're raising children who will not be competitive in the national world or the global world, and could be even become a laughingstock, you know, in the intelligent, achieving world.
Did you want to comment?
Our competitors, as we talked about China, those folks aren't doing things like this. They are exposing their children. In fact, they have programs where they are using their elders to give their children values, those real values. You know, they had their whole thing with just one child. They really made a mistake in doing that. So what they've done is look at their mistakes so that they can go forward. That's what. I made some trips to Cuba as well, and I have to tell you, no matter what you hear about Cuba, they have one of the best education systems in the Western Hemisphere and the best healthcare system. And let me say this about them. They educate every child. Their children can, you know how they learn history, American history? They use our documents and they talk about them. And they talk about the different, they look at maybe the person who wrote it and the person who had to live with it. So if they talk about enslavement, they talk about both. They talk about the whole thing. They are teaching their children how to analyze and critically think. We are not doing that, and you are so right. We are going, and talking about the global, we are going to be left behind. My daughter, you heard her, what she does. She had a trip to Finland, and you know Finland is at the top there. And so she, as an educator, asked them, okay, how do you all do this? And you know what they told her? We cannot lose one single child. And so the kinds of things that we're doing, not educating our children, not letting them have the freedom to read, to explore, to critically think, we are hurting our country, and we better understand that. This generation, we cannot do another generation of children who are blinded by some cultural conditioning. We can't let it happen. If we do, our country is in real trouble. We can't let it happen.
Thank you, Martha. Tell people how many times you've been to Cuba.
What did I say, about 8 times? I find it to be, because of the education system, a fascinating thing. One time I was working on a book on discipline, and I thought I was asking, you know, as a valedictorian, I thought I was asking a really intelligent question. And how do you all deal with your student suspensions and expulsions? They looked at me like I was a fool. What do you mean? If a principal suspended or expelled a student, do you know they wouldn't have a job? I didn't know. They educate every child. We just have to do that. And I remember, I was looking at something, David, about, you remember, some of you are as old as I am, and you remember when Sputnik, how the Russians got ahead of us? There, at that point, there was where they did a grant, fellowships for students, so that we could catch up. See, we're getting ourselves, man, what's your name? My name? Jane, we're getting in a situation where we're not going to be able to catch up. We were in a situation where Russia put the Sputnik up because we were not educating all of our children. We weren't ready. We do this thing, I mean, seriously, our nation is in trouble, so we can sit back and let these folks do what they want. We'll be sorry.
Well, and it may be a lesson for the whole nation, but it's mostly a lesson for this state.
Well, yes, darling, our state is, you know, when we're still talking about skills, folks want to learn in slavery when they've been doing stuff for thousands of years, we're in trouble.
You have someone back there, Carrie, and then John.
if I may, because obviously this is my personal pet peeve. I think the school board has a role to play in this. I think this is an area where we can where we have a responsibility to bring clarity so that our teachers do not feel like they must censor themselves or be fearful. And I think that is absolutely the role of a school board. And then it's a two-pronged approach, right? We can clarify the expectations at the county level, but we also need to advocate at the state level, and we need folks who are willing to do that as well. And I see that as being the role of the school board.
I'm glad you mentioned Sputnik, something that I kind of lived. I was in Germany with the Air Force when Sputnik went up. One of the more remarkable outcomes of that was that the president, ultimately Eisenhower, in recognizing how far behind we were with Russia, did not pour money into the Defense Fund. He signed the National Defense Education Act, which put equipment in science classrooms, like my own, and offered scholarships and all sorts of things to improve science education in this country. So here is this Republican president, not exactly a liberal, who recognized that the way to improve this country was through education, not by buying airplanes and guns.
The Department of Education. So, the plan is to do the complete opposite of something that worked before. But one of the things that's terrifying, and you just made me think about it though, is I can speak about Brevard County and one of our major charter school chains. And I'm not making this up. It's one of the classical schools. They legitimately do not have technology in their schools, and they brag about it. And the way they brag about it, it's on their website, is saying that the people who created said technology didn't have this technology. And that's how they rationalize it. It is so backwards thinking, and there's no rationalizing with it. So the only way to combat it is to constantly talk about it, so that the majority of people who are unaware of these things happening become aware. Because I think we all know, I think everyone in this room knows that the majority of people would find that ridiculous and absurd, but the majority of people don't even know it's happening.
Is this open for me to talk up? I'm not sure. I agree with you that the school board has this responsibility, but we're not talking about each one of our individuals' responsibility, because you're a minority on the school board, and we cannot have that happen, not just in Sarasota, but in all counties, in all over the states. And I've watched what's happened in my daughter's county in Virginia, Spotsylvania County. And I don't know if any of you have heard of it. They were the first people, they actually set a date to burn books in 2021, okay? They had a politically motivated school board, a majority until last year. A parent established a Facebook, Parent for Spotsylvania County for Education. And parents, grandparents, kids, it's Facebook, and I know Facebook's bad, but it keeps you up to date. The school board meeting is being held. Here's the agenda. Here are my thoughts. He does not take sides. He stresses all the things you're talking about. Teachers are involved in that. Teachers have been threatened. I mean, it's been awful. Finally, this year, it was encouraged. They've encouraged 17 years old, that are turning 18 to vote. Parents, guess what? The incumbent, two of the people who are incumbent were not voted in. The other 2 are still there. And so they have a reversal. And it's just amazing what's happening. But they've got a lot to undo, because you talk about teachers unqualified. They had a teacher had no qualifications that was arrested this year for having drugs in the drawer in her desk. I mean, those are the kind of things that are happening, and they could be happening here. But it's taking you and me and other young people, even the students, to be involved and to know what's going on, and we've got to find a way to be involved and get on a regular basis.
Yes. Are you all familiar with the C space? I see Julie here. Yes. This is the power of community, and this is what we're doing here in Sarasota. We have young people, we have students, we have parents, we have teachers, people coming together saying we are done, enough. We do believe in public education. We do support our schools and our students, and so if you are interested in getting involved with that, you can talk to, I see lovely Julie right here. They have done amazing work with my election and Tom's election, and I know they will continue to do amazing work, but it's folks like that, it's those sorts of organizations that when we come together, the power of that is really, really impactful. So
I'd like to underscore what Liz said too. Anya is here from C. Xander, who all of you heard is connected to C, and Julie is in the second row here, who will answer questions at the reception, I'm sure, if you have them.
Hi, I'm Dr. Patricia Vandenberg. I moved to Florida from Massachusetts, and I cannot express the shock and dismay that I have experienced in terms of how education is being treated here. So I am so grateful for all of you here today. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you, magnificent speakers and activists, for what you're doing. I'm doing all I can to recruit others of like mind to Sarasota and all of Florida, and we'll keep fighting. I mean, this is so bottom line critical to the well-being of humanity. So, thank you.
Rich, did you want a mic? Can you reach that?
First, thank you to all of you. As you're speaking, I'm reminded of something. As I mentioned earlier, I have a desk out there. I'm representing Americans United for Separation of Church and State. And as each of you are speaking, I was reminded of, and don't get me wrong on this, the religious content of what is happening to each of you. Moms for Liberty buys into Christian nationalism. Liz, you have spoken on the stump about your experience in homeschooling and learning that the earth is not 6,000 years old. That brings to mind the issue of teachers are afraid to teach evolution because it goes against the biblical teaching. African American history, I don't have to tell you how many times in the Bible people have used the Bible as an excuse. So across the board, what we're finding, even look at the January 6th insurrection. There's a movie out called Spiritual Warriors that talks about what was going on during the insurrection, where people holding up Bibles, exhorting Jesus, praying to Jesus. I'm not making an anti-Christian statement, and what I'm saying is that what we are experiencing really is an attempt through Project 2025 and others like it to impose a Christian viewpoint on our education system, on our government, and everything. And it is dangerous. It is very dangerous. And I think each of you, directly or indirectly, are experiencing an example of what happens when it takes over. Thank you to all of you. Yes, absolutely.
Hold on 1 second. Coming back here to you.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I want to first comment on the three speakers who are here today. What brave people you are. It just takes so much courage to go out there and do the kinds of things that you've done and are continuing to do, and I really thank you for that. I also want everyone to know, first of all, that the League of Women Voters of Sarasota County is here. We have a brochure which you'll be able to pick up. It is on Amendment 1. It has a lot of information in it, so be sure to come there. We also have a flyer that you can use, and it has a QR code in it, so you'll be able to get some more copies of that and digitally send them to other people. I also want you to know there is another organization in Sarasota. It's fairly new. It's called Public Education Network Sarasota, Penn Sarasota. We have about 11 different organizations at this time that have joined us. We are working together on public education to support what we're doing in Sarasota schools. One of the things we're doing right now is supporting the referendum. And we have cards to give you, again, at the reception, which are about the referendum. It outlines all the important things that the referendum will do for the public school students and their teachers and the community. So it's really important. I also have lawn signs. I don't have them here today, but there will be a way for you to sign up today. If you would like a lawn sign, I will make sure that you get one to support the referendum. And the last thing I want to tell you has to do with book bans. Every single district in the state received a directive from the Department of Education that they needed to weed the books. That is, get them out of the library, go through, see what they were going to discard. I've gone through the weeding list for Sarasota County. Thousands of books have been discarded. Some of them were discarded because they were, quote, not age appropriate. Okay? There was a period of time where they didn't have to, the media specialists who weeded the books did not have to indicate why they were weeding them. But if you look at the titles, you will see that certain authors were targeted. They are out of the libraries. The Department of Education has told teachers and school administrators to, quote, err on the side of caution, okay? And that's what they are doing. Those weeded documents are available if you request them, but, you know, it is a process. Just be cautious of what is going on. Watch what's going on. Watch the litigation that's occurring. There has been litigation that's been successful. And so these books that are targeting LGBTQ communities, or not targeting them, that are depicting them and giving stories that students can relate to, those need to be put back on the shelves. Okay? So keep an eye out for what's going on. Read the press and follow the litigation, because things are changing, and they are changing in the school boards as well. Thank you.
Thank you. League of Women Voters. Okay, let's do one or two more. I'm coming to you. I know you've had your hand up. Thanks for being patient.
Again, thank you to all you warriors. Thank you. My daughter is adopted from India, and she graduated from New College last year. And I'm sure most of you have seen the photos. And Julie, you may know, was really, her organization, C Alliance, was crucial in getting those photos of the thousands and thousands of books that were taken out of New College and dumped before the students or the librarians or anybody knew. So that just happened. But my daughter's school, New College of Florida, is now destroyed. It is no longer a functioning the school that she went to. We call it the zombie school. It's dead with some sort of strange entity inside of it. So that's one thing that's already happened, is that New College is gone. Yes, yeah. So Julie and C Alliance was really, really fundamental in getting those photos. I also wanted to ask, I've taught at a public rural girls' school in the middle of Jamaica, West Indies, before I went to medical school. And so I have a lot of heart for all that you're talking about. And I did want to ask, do you, Dr. Bireda, or any of you, do you see a role in not only history teachers and history classes, but things like biology classes? As you know, with the Human Genome Project, there is no such thing as race. It is biologically not true. We are all 99.9% the same. There is no such thing as race. Racism is a cultural construct. There's no such thing as race, and it just seems that if we had the narrative, the true narrative, the factual, around the school curriculum, and not only in the history class, it might be also a powerful force.
Thank you. Anyone else? Serena.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone who spoke today. It was wonderful. I have been reading Project 2025 literally for probably at least a year and a half. I've been talking to people about it. The media hadn't paid attention to it, but it is very Christian nationalist, not the ordinary Christian nationalist. And that is driving this whole movement. And people aren't paying attention to that because they want to impose their value system, their religion on everyone. These are individuals who deny that what our forefathers put in the Constitution. And I think Americans United for Separation of Church and State doesn't mean that you shouldn't have whatever religion you want. You should be able to believe in this country. They are trying to take that away from you, regardless of what your religion is or whether you have no religion. It isn't their business. It really isn't. But that is, if you read that document and you look at certain sections of it, that is the goal, and that has been driving everything here. And Governor DeSantis has implemented this 2 years ago, at least 2 years ago. It's already in operation here. And we've been going to school board meetings, hospital board meetings. It's amazing. Okay, I'm very passionate.
Could talk about that for a while.
I just want to piggyback on that. The real intention of the attack on public education not only is just to privatize it and put money in their pockets, because that's clear as day, but I've been saying this from the very beginning, especially because of the very racist, segregated history of Brevard County. The intent is to legalize segregation in its own new way, in its new form. And it's a class war. And really what Project 2025 is, yes, it's absolutely Christian nationalism, but it's a way for the government to legally legislate whose race, whose religion, and whose socioeconomic status is valued most. And you're absolutely correct. I don't remember the exact number, but I had just listened to a speaker about Project 2025, and the amount of policies that have already been enacted in the state of Florida that are in that project is alarming. I think it was like 50, or it might have been 50 or 80. I don't know. It was an alarming number, and the majority of them had to do with public education, unfortunately.
I write a column for MEER, MEER.com. The column, the essay that I wrote for next month, and I wrote it right before the election, is what's at stake in the U.S. 2024 election. A return to the promise of whiteness, or the equality that we're promised. I encourage you to read that, because what you're saying, what you just said, it is a return to that, to the promise. In fact, I have copies, I'm not trying to, but I have copies of the promise of whiteness that I'll be selling. The promise of whiteness will tell you everything that these folks are involved. It's not about all of us. It's about this particular group, and what they want to impose on all Americans. It's race, it's class. They're going to have this system again. You watch. They're going to have this system unless we do something. So yes, take a look. Next, meer.com. In fact, I have a article, the one I wrote this month, on school, what happened after Brown. What happened after Brown, everything didn't go as, that's why my daughter is working on Brown's Promise, because what's happened, schools were segregated. We're back to resegregation. And we knew that in the 70s, when we did have desegregation, every child benefited, everybody benefits. When we look at different cultures, and this culture can bring this and that, everybody benefits. And so, ma'am, yes, we need, from biology, everything. We just need to look at our education system. And the thing that's scary to me is that they want to eliminate Head Start. And Head Start has proven that children need that. I just, some of it is just unbelievable. But yes, we're going back to a system of white supremacy if we don't prevent it. And see, what people don't understand about this is whiteness, and I don't mean to do a little history thing, but anyway, whiteness in 1619, when the boat came with the slaves, there was no such concept as whiteness in the colonies. There was no such thing. It was after Bacon's Rebellion, and whiteness was imposed because of the indentured and the common whites. Whiteness is a psychological method to control the majority of white people. That's what it's about. And so the majority of white people should resist that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know. You can hear me, I guess. Huh?
Yes.
All right. Just to share with what you said, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I knew nothing about color. My parents had a neighbor across the street, Miss MacDade, who was one of her best friends. We were not segregated at all. We were blacks and whites all over that area. And I went through 12 grades of school with what we called colored people back then. Through 12 grades, I never knew color. Never knew it. Virginia Tracy, a good friend of mine, I ate in her house. In my house, my parents. Royal Hart, a good friend of mine, colored kid. 12 grades of school, we were best friends. My point, I graduated high school, and I went to Washington, D.C., to work for the federal government. And I went with a friend who was from Arkansas. We rode the Greyhound bus, spent the week down south. I could not believe my eyes. A 19-year-old kid, the bus stop somewhere in the south, Greyhound bus, and we went into that station, and I never saw in my life tarpaulin right down the middle of that station. Colors over here, and that's what it said. And whites over here. I never, until I was 19, saw colors only fountains and whites only fountains. What really upset me was halfway through that week, we were going to Jonesboro, Arkansas, the nearby town. And we're going down the street, there were, I think, 5 in that family. We're walking down the sidewalk, and I actually approached this colored lady. And I moved to her. And my friend's mother did not speak to me for the rest of that trip because I stepped aside for a colored woman to go through. That was my first experience. You know, when you mentioned on racism and white supremacy, it took me all those years to see that firsthand, growing up, never seeing color.
I want you to think now about what you're seeing now. I am hearing more and more comments about blacks, about Mexicans, about Muslims, and even about Jewish people. I just think now, we're here, it's more intense. It's more intense, this overt discriminating and saying things about people. It wasn't this way. Now, you went through that was Jim Crow. What I'm sensing is that what you said, we're going back into Jim Crow because we're hearing it. We were not hearing it. It is so overt now, what we're hearing, very overt. And that should tell us something about the fear and what's happening.
You get the last question.
Okay, great. Hi. Yeah, and just thinking about that as a Hispanic immigrant, I've seen that throughout my life too, growing up in Miami and moving here. My name's Carlos. I teach at Booker Middle School right now. And and actually, I've been teaching there since 2013, but in 2016, I took a year off and I taught in Brevard County in Melbourne for a year. It was the same year that Trump got elected in 2016, and then I came back over here. And but yeah, I just wanted to share with you my perspective from inside the schools, my perspective. And it reflects a lot of the things that have been saying. This lady back here used the terms err in the side of caution. And Liz, you've been using the term too risky. And that's what I've been seeing, at least in my classroom, and through the teachers that I speak with and things that have been going on in my school, that sense of caution and riskiness. And do I want to teach this? Do I want to teach that? I teach a class called Modern Band in my class. So it's not traditional chorus, band, orchestra. It's modern music, hip hop, rock and roll, and I want to teach things like how the history of the blues reflects slavery, and the history of early rock and roll and jazz reflects the Jim Crow era, and how current hip hop music reflects mass incarceration. And I'm just afraid. My wife and I have these conversations. My wife is a social worker in Manatee County Schools, and we're just like, what do we do? Do I risk it? We also just spent a month in Finland and for a music education conference this summer, and just seeing the ways that they do there, like you were saying, the Finnish education system just, I don't know, just opened up my mind. And I was just thinking how things can be different here. So I'm glad that people like you and events like this are happening to give me that little bit of hope of like, okay, I can take some risks.
Okay. You know, really, when you say, I mean, we're talking about music, seriously? No, we're talking about music. I'm not even talking about your biology or your history. I'm talking about music. This has gotten insane. No, it's insane.
First of all, I just want to commend you. I know you're being honest about how you stop and you think before you do it, but I'm going to guess that you don't stop, right? And I appreciate that, because so often teachers in my county feel very comfortable telling me their truth and being honest about their struggles. And so often they're asking me for a permission structure to do what they're doing every single day. And what's fearful is when I'm no longer on the board, will they feel comfortable? So thank you for doing what you do. And my husband is a 7th grade civics teacher now. And he shared a story with me just the other day. Quite frankly, I mean, he's married to me. We've dealt with a lot. He doesn't normally feel uncomfortable in the classroom. He couldn't care less. There's a giant poster of Obama in the background. But this was the first time where he told me out loud, like I paused for a minute, because a student came up to him after class and said, if Kamala Harris has all of these promises, why doesn't she just do them now? Why couldn't she do them now? She's vice president. And he told me, I paused and I thought, okay, how am I going to answer this question? Because I'm going to get myself in trouble if I say it the wrong way, right? And so even somebody like him, who feels so comfortable and so bold, just do what he's supposed to do, he still feels that pressure to step back. So thank you. I commend you. I can continue to do what you're doing because it's the right thing, and that's what's most important. Yes. And
Thank
you will
you,
have
Carlos.
my full support. Yes.
Well, it is time that we end our 2 hours plus, I think, very stimulating couple of hours, and thank you for being here as guests, and thank these speakers one more time. And remember, they were the speakers that said, we would love to do it. Just remember that. It's such a can-do thing. And we can do by keeping working hard attain some of those things that we fear that we just talked about too. So let's all keep working as a team, as comrades, and keep working on it. And we are going to have a reception in the room that's just outside. The door is open now, I think. And we can continue a conversation. We can have some treats, and you can pick up some swag. And remember, you can have as much as you want of the merchandise from ALA. Thank you.
David, may I just say one thing? David, we talk about caution and careful. I would caution you to not use the word comrade.
That's another word coming back. I couldn't resist.